A trooper filed a traffic stop report at 11:43 p.m. The vehicle description matched. The plate number matched. The driver's information was documented. 3 witnesses confirmed seeing the stop occur. Highway cameras captured the patrol car's lights. But when the state database was checked the next morning, that plate number had never been issued. Not expired. Not transferred. Never created. The vehicle identification number didn't exist in any registry. The driver's license number led nowhere. And the trooper's dashcam footage showed him standing on the shoulder alone for 18 minutes, talking to no one, writing citations for a car that was never manufactured. Night shift work creates a particular kind of professional, not better or worse than day shift, just different. The metabolism changes. Appetite shifts to unusual hours. Social connections become strained because your awake time doesn't align with anyone else's. Holidays mean nothing because someone still has to work them. Your friends stop inviting you to things because you're always sleeping or working. After a few years, you stop minding. The isolation becomes comfortable, preferable even. You develop relationships with other night workers. The gas station attendant who's there every night. The cook at the 24-hour diner. Other officers or dispatchers or medical personnel who understand the rhythm. These aren't deep friendships, just consistent presences. People who exist in the same temporal space. And that's enough. The work itself becomes meditative. Long stretches of routine punctuated by brief moments requiring full attention. You learn to stay alert while being relaxed. To notice details without actively searching for them. To read situations quickly and accurately. Traffic stops become automatic. Approach vectors. Hand positions. Sight lines. You can assess threat level in seconds without conscious thought. Welfare checks follow patterns. Knock. Announce. Wait. Document. Most calls resolve predictably. Domestic disputes where everyone's tired and angry, but not dangerous. Noise complaints that quiet down once an officer arrives. Alarms that were triggered by wind or animals or faulty wiring. The unpredictable calls are rare. Maybe 1 in 50. And those are the ones you remember. Not because they're dramatic, but because something about them doesn't resolve cleanly. A detail that stays loose. A question that doesn't get answered. Most officers have a handful of these. Calls they think about occasionally. Wonder what actually happened. Whether they missed something important. Whether the resolution they documented was accurate or just convenient. A Marine Patrol officer in British Columbia worked coastal waters. Night shifts meant checking boats, monitoring fishing activity, responding to distress calls. Most of his work was preventative, making sure recreational boaters had proper safety equipment, ensuring commercial vessels followed regulations. The waters were cold, unforgiving. People who ended up in the water without protection had minutes before hypothermia became critical. He'd done several body recoveries over the years. Drownings, accidents, suicides. You learn not to think about it too much. Just recover, document, move forward. One September night, he was patrolling near a series of small islands. Uninhabited, rocky, used occasionally by kayakers as rest stops. It was around 1 a.m. clear night. Calm water. He was running without lights. Standard practice. Better visibility for spotting other vessels. He came around the north side of one island and saw something on shore. A light. Flickering. Like a campfire. He slowed. Approached. Beached his patrol boat. Walked up the rocks. The fire was there. Burning. Fresh wood. Recently built. But no one was around. No boat. No tent. No equipment. Just the fire. He called out. No response. He searched the immediate area. The island was small. Maybe 200 yards across. Rocky terrain. Some vegetation. Nowhere to hide. He was alone. He returned to the fire. Examined it. The wood was dry. Burning hot. Someone had built this within the last 30 minutes. He walked the perimeter of the island. No other boats. No kayaks. No sign of anyone. He went back to his boat. Called it in. Dispatch logged it. He returned to the fire. Waited. After 20 minutes, he extinguished it. Made sure it was completely out. He left. Continued his patrol. The next night, he passed the same island. Checked it during daylight hours the following day. No signs of recent activity. No fire pit. No disturbed ground. Just rocks and scrub brush. A week later, he was patrolling the same area. Night shift again. Same time. Around 1 a.m. He came around the island. There was a fire on the shore. Same location. He approached. Beached. Walked up. The fire was burning. Fresh. No one there. He searched more thoroughly this time. Checked crevices. Climbed to the highest point. Nothing. He sat by the fire. Waited an hour. No one came. He extinguished it. Left. This happened 4 more times over the next month. Always the same island. Same location. Same time window. Always a fresh fire. Never anyone there. He stopped reporting it. Just documented it privately. Started avoiding that section of his patrol route. 3 months later, he was reassigned. Different sector. He mentioned the island to the officer taking over his route. Described what he'd experienced. The other officer nodded. Said the previous officer had mentioned something similar. Said he'd seen fires there too. Years ago, before the current officer started. They didn't discuss it further. Just acknowledged it. An unspoken understanding that some things on the water don't have explanations. That you document what you can and accept what you can't. The officer never went back to that island. But he thinks about it sometimes. Wonders if the fires are still happening. If someone else is finding them. Extinguishing them, wondering where they come from. He never checked the historical records for that island. Some answers make everything worse. A parking enforcement officer in Seattle worked downtown during overnight hours, checking meters, issuing citations, making sure commercial loading zones were clear during specified hours. The work was solitary. Most people were asleep. Streets were empty except for occasional late-night workers or people heading home from bars. He'd been doing it for 6 years. Knew every street, every alley, every loading dock. His route was consistent, efficient. He could complete it in 5 hours with time for breaks. One November night, he was working his usual route, around 2:30 a.m. Pioneer Square area. He turned down an alley he'd been down thousands of times. Halfway through, he stopped. Something was different. There was a door in the brick wall on his left. Green metal door. Industrial style. Recessed about 6 inches into the wall. He'd never seen it before. He walked closer. Examined it. The door looked old. Paint was faded. Hinges were rusted. But there was no visible lock. No handle. Just a smooth metal surface with a small placard next to it. The placard had a number. 23. Nothing else. He tried pushing the door. It didn't move. Knocked on it. Hollow sound. Metal. He stepped back. Looked at the surrounding wall. Red brick. Weathered. At least 80 years old. He'd been down this alley hundreds of times. This door had never been here. He was certain. He took a photo with his phone. Made a note of the location. Continued his route. The next night he went back. Same time. Walked down the alley. The door was gone. Solid brick wall. No indication anything had been there. He checked his phone. The photo showed the alley. The brick wall. No door. Just wall. He stood there. Confused. He'd seen it. Touched it. Knocked on it. He checked the next night. And the next. For 2 weeks. Same time. Different times. The door never appeared again. He mentioned it to another parking officer. They went to look together. Nothing. Just brick. The other officer suggested maybe he'd been in a different alley. He insisted he hadn't. Showed him exactly where he'd been standing. The other officer didn't argue. Just suggested he get more sleep. He stopped talking about it. But he kept checking. Once a week. Then once a month. For a year. The door never came back. Eventually, he requested a different route. Different sector. He still works downtown, but avoids that alley. Not out of fear. Just discomfort. The uncertainty. The knowledge that something was there and then wasn't. And not knowing which version was real. Transit systems operate continuously in major cities. Trains. Buses. Stations. Someone's always working. Always moving. The infrastructure runs on precise schedules. Every vehicle is tracked. Every station is monitored. Camera coverage is extensive. When something happens outside the recorded timeline, it creates problems. Not technical problems, procedural ones. How do you document an event that occurred between camera frames, during a gap that shouldn't exist? The standard response is to note the gap and move forward. Assume equipment failure. But when multiple cameras at multiple locations show the same gap at the same time, that's harder to explain. And when the gap corresponds exactly with a reported incident, it becomes something else. Not evidence of failure, but evidence of something else. Something that knows where the cameras are, what they can see, and how to avoid being recorded. But thinking that way leads nowhere productive. So the gaps get noted, the incidents get documented, and everyone agrees it's equipment failure. Because the alternative suggests intentionality. And that's not something anyone wants to consider. A forestry service worker in northern Ontario managed fire watchtowers. Remote structures scattered across thousands of square kilometers. His job was to visit each tower monthly. Check equipment. Verify supplies. Make sure everything was functional. During fire season, the towers were staffed. Observers would stay up there for weeks at a time. Off-season, they were empty. Just structures waiting for the next season. One March, he was making his rounds. Late winter. Snow still heavy on the ground. He reached a tower designated as Tower 7, accessed by a rough logging road. Four-wheel drive necessary. He parked at the base. The tower was 60 feet tall. Metal frame. Enclosed cabin at the top. He climbed the stairs. They were ice-covered. Slippery. He took his time. Reached the top. Opened the cabin door. Inside, everything was as expected. Radio equipment. Logbooks. Supplies. He started his inspection. Checked the radio. Functional. Check the fire finder. Aligned properly. Check supplies. Adequate. He was filling out his report when he noticed something. The logbook. It was open. The last entry was dated 2 days ago. He read it. Standard observation notes. Weather conditions. Visibility. Signed at the bottom. He didn't recognize the signature. He checked the duty roster. Tower 7 wasn't scheduled for staffing until May. He radioed base. Asked if anyone had been sent to Tower 7 recently. They said no. He described the logbook entry. They checked their records. No one had been assigned. He took a photo of the entry. The handwriting was clear. Neat. Professional. Weather report was accurate. He'd checked conditions for that day. Everything matched. He looked around the cabin. No sleeping bag. No personal items. No food wrappers. Nothing to indicate someone had been there. He checked the stairs. No footprints in the snow besides his own. The snow had been undisturbed. If someone had climbed up in the last 2 days, there would be tracks. He went back inside. Read the entry again. It was there. Real. Written in ink. He completed his inspection. Locked the cabin. Climbed down. Drove back. At base, he showed his supervisor the photo. The supervisor checked the records again. Confirmed. No one assigned. The supervisor asked if it could be an old entry. If maybe the logbook hadn't been updated properly last season. The worker explained the date. 2 days ago. The supervisor didn't have an explanation. Said he'd look into it. 2 weeks later, the worker returned to Tower 7. Different reason. Equipment repair. He climbed up. Checked the logbook. There was another entry. Dated the previous day. Same handwriting. Different weather observations. Accurate again. He checked outside. No tracks. No vehicle. No sign of anyone. He radioed base immediately. They sent another worker to investigate. The other worker arrived within hours. They searched together. Found nothing. The second entry was there. Clear. Documented. But no one had written it. No one who was supposed to exist. The tower was secured. The logbook was removed. Sent for analysis. Handwriting was consistent. Ink was fresh. Paper showed no signs of aging or pre-printing. Someone had written those entries. Recently, while the tower was locked, while the snow showed no signs of access, and they documented real weather conditions. Accurate observations, as if they'd actually been there. watching, recording, fulfilling a duty no one had assigned them. The tower remained unstaffed that season. Equipment was relocated. Tower 7 was officially decommissioned the following year. Structural concerns was the official reason, but the logbook stayed in archives. Evidence of something that happened but couldn't have. A record of someone doing work they weren't asked to do, from a location they couldn't access, with information they shouldn't have. Sometimes the documentation is more disturbing than the event. A corrections transport officer in Manitoba drove detainees between facilities. County jail to courthouse. Courthouse to provincial prison. Prison and medical facilities. Standard transport work. Long drives. Limited interaction. The detainees were secured, separated by barriers. No direct contact. One January night, he was transporting a single detainee. Male. Mid-40s. Sentenced. Being moved to begin serving his term. The drive was 3 hours. Highway. Rural. Limited traffic at night. They left at 9 p.m. The detainee was quiet. Compliant. No issues. About an hour into the drive, the officer glanced in his rearview mirror. Checked on the detainee. The man was staring directly at the mirror. Making eye contact. The officer looked away. Standard procedure. Don't engage unnecessarily. A few minutes later, he checked again. Still staring. Same expression. Blank. Focused. The officer continued driving. This went on for another 30 minutes. Every time he checked the mirror, the man was staring. Not blinking. Not moving. Just staring. The officer felt uncomfortable. Not threatened. Just observed. Watched. He tried looking at different intervals. Random checks. Every time. The man was ready. Eyes locked on the mirror. Waiting. They arrived at the facility at midnight. The officer completed the transfer. Handed off custody. During the paperwork, he mentioned the behavior. The receiving officer asked if there was a problem. He said no. Just odd behavior. The receiving officer noted it. They completed the transfer. The officer drove back. Empty vehicle. He checked the mirror. Old habit. For just a second, he thought he saw someone in the back seat. Same position. Same stare. He looked again. Empty. Just the restraint bench and barriers. He pulled over. Got out. Checked the back. Nothing. He got back in. Continued driving. But every few minutes he'd check the mirror. And every time he expected to see someone there. Staring back. He completed his shift. Filed his report. No incidents. The next week he was assigned another transport. Different detainee. Different route. Same thing happened. An hour into the drive, he checked the mirror. The detainee was staring. Right at the mirror. Waiting. Making eye contact. The officer looked away. We checked again. Still staring. This happened on 3 more transports. Different detainees. Different nights. Same behavior. After the 5th time, he mentioned it to his supervisor. Asked if this was common. The supervisor said, sometimes detainees do that. Power play. Psychological dominance. Nothing to worry about. The officer accepted this explanation, but it didn't feel right. The detainees weren't showing aggression, weren't trying to intimidate. They were just watching, waiting, like they knew when he was going to look, like they were synchronized somehow. He requested reassignment. Different duty. The supervisor approved. He hasn't done transport work in 2 years, but he still thinks about it. How they knew. How they were always ready. Always watching. Even when it should have been impossible to predict when he'd check the mirror. Like they were seeing something he wasn't. Responding to something beyond his awareness. And he wonders if they were watching him. Or watching something else. Something in the vehicle he couldn't see. Something that moved when he moved. Looked when he looked. And the detainees could see it. Could track it. Could follow its movements with perfect accuracy. Because it was always there. Right behind him. Reflected in glass, he was too focused on the prisoners to notice. When he drives now, he doesn't use the rearview mirror unless absolutely necessary. A utility worker in Nova Scotia worked night maintenance on water treatment facilities, small remote stations, automated systems that needed occasional manual intervention. His route covered 6 facilities. He'd visit each one, Check readings. Adjust settings. Document any issues. The work was predictable. Each facility was identical. Same layout. Same equipment. Same procedures. One October night, he was at Facility 3. Rural location. Forest on 3 sides. Single access road. He parked outside. Unlocked the outer door. Entered the control room. Started his checks. Everything was normal. Pressure levels good. Chemical balance acceptable. Flow rates within parameters. He was completing his paperwork when the radio on his belt crackled. His company radio. Used for communication between workers. A voice came through. Male. Distorted. Said his name. Asked for his location. He responded. Said he was at Facility 3. The voice acknowledged. Said they were sending someone to assist. He asked why. What assistance? The voice said there was an issue reported. They'd explain when they arrived. He said okay. Waited. 20 minutes passed. No one arrived. He radioed back. Asked for an update. No response. He tried again. Static. He checked his phone. No signal. Common in rural areas. He completed his work. Left the facility. Locked up. Drove to the next location. Facility 4. When he arrived, he radioed in. Reported completion of Facility 3. Starting Facility 4. Dispatch responded. Confirmed. They didn't mention sending assistance. He asked about it. Described the earlier radio call. Dispatch said they hadn't sent anyone. Hadn't radioed him. He insisted he'd received a call. Dispatch pulled the logs. No outgoing communication to his radio during that time frame. No record of the conversation. He asked if anyone else was working tonight. Dispatch confirmed he was alone. Only utility worker on shift. He felt cold. He'd heard the voice. Clear. Specific. Used his name. Knew his location. Dispatch asked if he wanted to come in. In his shift early. He considered it. But he had 4 more facilities. He said he'd continue. Finish the route. Dispatch said to check in regularly. He agreed. He completed Facility 4. No issues. Drove to Facility 5. As he was approaching, he saw headlights. Another vehicle parked outside. He pulled up. Got out. Looked around. No one there. The vehicle was a company truck. Same model as his. He checked the plates. It was his plate number. Same truck. Same vehicle identification number on the door. He walked around it. Identical. Same dent on the passenger side. Same scratch bumper. He tried the door. Locked. He looked inside. His equipment bag on the seat. His coffee cup in the holder. His work jacket on the passenger seat. He stepped back. Looked at his own truck. Everything was still there. His bag. His cup. His jacket. Both trucks were identical. Down to the contents. He got his phone. Took pictures. The signal was back. He called dispatch. Described the situation. Dispatch checked vehicle tracking. Only 1 truck at that location. His truck. He insisted there were 2. Dispatch said their system showed 1. He sent the photos. Dispatch received them. Said the photos showed his truck. Only his truck. He looked at the images. They showed 1 vehicle. His vehicle. The second truck wasn't in the photos. But it was standing right there. He walked over. Touched it. Solid. Real. Cold metal. He radioed dispatch. Said he was going to check the facility. They told him to wait. Backup was being sent. He agreed. Stood there. Watching both trucks. After 40 minutes, another worker arrived. The worker got out. Asked what the issue was. The utility worker pointed to the second truck. The other worker looked confused. Said he only saw 1 truck. The utility worker walked over. The truck was gone. Just empty space where it had been. He looked around. No tire tracks. No indication it had been there. He showed the other worker the photos on his phone. The worker confirmed. Only 1 truck visible. They searched the area. Found nothing. Checked the facility. Everything was normal. They completed the inspection together. Left. The utility worker finished his shift with the backup present. Filed his report. Took a week off. When he returned, he requested day shift. They accommodated. He hasn't worked nights in that sector since. But he kept the photos. Even though they don't show what he saw. even though there's no evidence beyond his experience. He kept them because he knows what was there, knows he touched it, knows it was real, and he knows that somewhere his truck exists in duplicate. And the other version is driving the same route, checking the same facilities, running parallel, just slightly out of phase, visible only sometimes, only to certain people, at certain times. And he wonders if the driver of that truck knows, if maybe he's the duplicate, if the other version is the original, and he's the echo, the reflection, the one who shouldn't be there. He doesn't drive that model truck anymore. Emergency call centers route calls based on location, cell tower triangulation, GPS data, address information. The system is accurate within meters. When a call comes in, the dispatcher knows where it originated, can send units to the precise location. This technology has saved countless lives, but it's also created new problems. Calls that originate from impossible locations, coordinates that place the caller somewhere they couldn't be, underground, midair, in bodies of water. The system logs these as errors, equipment malfunction. But when the caller describes an accurate location, provides landmarks, street names, and the coordinates say they're somewhere else entirely, that's harder to explain. The standard procedure is to trust the caller, send units to the described location. Usually the caller is found. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes the coordinates were accurate and the caller's description was wrong. Confusion, disorientation, panic. But occasionally the caller is found at the impossible location, standing where the coordinates said they were, where they couldn't be, and they have no memory of how they got there. No explanation for the discrepancy. They think they're somewhere else. Describe buildings that aren't there, streets that don't exist, and the system says they're right. But reality says they're wrong, and no one can reconcile the two. A railroad safety inspector in Alberta worked night inspections, checking tracks, signals, crossings, making sure everything was functional before morning traffic. His sector covered 80 kilometers of track, mix of freight and passenger service. He drove a specialized inspection vehicle, maintenance truck modified to drive on rails. He'd cover the route twice per week. Same schedule, same checkpoints. One February night, he was running his inspection. Around midnight. Cold. Clear. He was at kilometer marker 47. Routine check. Visual inspection of rails. Checking for cracks. Wear. Anything unusual. He stepped out of his vehicle. Walked along the track. His spotlight illuminating the rails ahead. About 50 meters out, he saw something. A figure. Standing on the tracks. Facing away. He called out. No response. He walked closer. The figure didn't move. He got within 20 meters. Could see details now. Male. Wearing old-style work clothes. Heavy canvas. Boots. No coat despite the cold. He called out again. Louder. Still no response. He approached to within 10 meters. The figure was completely still. Not breathing visibly. Not shifting weight. Just standing. He said he was railway personnel. Asked the person to step off the tracks. Nothing. He got closer. 5 meters. He could see the person clearly now. Face in profile. Middle-aged. Beard. Expression blank. He reached out. Was about to touch the person's shoulder. The figure turned. Looked directly at him. No emotion. No acknowledgement. Just looked. Then stepped forward. Off the tracks. Into the darkness beyond the spotlight. The inspector followed with his light. The beams swept across empty ground. Gravel. Small bushes. No person. He walked to where the figure had been. Looked around. No footprints in the frost. No disturbed ground. He returned to his vehicle. Got his radio. Reported a possible trespasser. Described the location. Dispatch acknowledged. Said they'd alert local police. He waited. Completed his inspection of the immediate area. Police arrived 30 minutes later. They searched together. Found nothing. No tracks. No evidence of anyone being there. The inspector described what he'd seen. The officers took notes. Asked if he'd seen the person's face clearly. He said yes. They asked him to describe it. He did. As much detail as he could remember. The officers looked at each other. One of them got a folder from their vehicle, showed him a photograph, asked if this was the person. The inspector looked. It was the same face. Exactly. He confirmed. The officer said the photograph was from 1972. A worker who died in an accident. On this section of track. Near this marker. The inspector felt something shift in his chest. He asked how the worker had died. The officer said he'd been struck by a train. At night. Cause of death ruled accidental, but circumstances unclear. He'd been standing on the tracks. Made no attempt to move. The inspector didn't say anything. The officer said this wasn't the first report. Other workers had seen similar figures over the years. Same area. Same description. Same behavior. They'd stopped investigating them as trespasser calls. Now, they just documented them. Filed them under unexplained sightings. The inspector asked how many reports there had been. The officer said 11. Over the past 40 years. All-night shift workers. All within a kilometer of this marker. All describing the same person. The inspector requested reassignment. Different route. They approved it within a week. He hasn't been back to that section of track. But he kept the photograph. The officer gave him a copy. Said sometimes it helps to know what you saw was real. Even if it shouldn't be possible. Even if the person died 50 years ago. At least you're not the only one who's seen them. At least there's a record. A history. Evidence that whatever's happening has been happening. Will keep happening. Whether anyone wants to acknowledge it or not. The company doesn't mention it in safety briefings. A wildlife officer in New Brunswick patrolled rural areas. Monitoring hunting activity. Checking licenses. Investigating poaching reports. Most of his work was reactive. Responding to calls. Following up on complaints. One November evening, he got a report. Deer carcass found. Illegally killed. Left in a field. He drove out. The location was remote. Private farmland. The owner had found it that morning. Called it in. The officer arrived just before dark. Met with the landowner. They walked to the field together. The deer was there. Adult doe. Shot. Field dressed. But left behind. Unusual. Poachers typically take the meat. The officer examined the carcass. Single gunshot. Clean kill. Professional. He took photos. Documented the scene. Asked the landowner if they'd heard shots. Seen vehicles. The landowner said no. Said they'd walked this field 2 days ago. The deer hadn't been there. The officer noted this. Asked if they'd checked the property. Make sure no one was camping illegally. The landowner agreed. The officer returned to his vehicle. Started processing the documentation. As he was finishing, his radio crackled. The landowner's voice. Panicked. Said to come back to the field. Immediately. The officer drove back. Found the landowner standing at the field edge. Pointing. The officer walked over. The deer carcass was gone. Completely gone. They'd been away maybe 20 minutes. The officer went to where it had been. There was blood. Drag marks in the grass. Leading into the woods. They followed. The marks continued for about 100 meters. Then stopped. Just ended. The ground was undisturbed beyond that point. The officer examined the area. No vehicle tracks. No ATV trails. The marks just stopped. Like whatever was being dragged had lifted off the ground. They searched. Widening circles. Found nothing. The officer called for backup. Another officer arrived. They searched until full dark. Nothing. The carcass was gone. The officer documented everything. Filed his report. Listed it as possible evidence removal. Suspect unknown. A week later he got another call. Same area. Different farm. Another deer carcass. Same situation. Shot. Field dressed. Left behind. He responded. Documented it. Posted surveillance. Stayed nearby. Monitoring. For hours later he checked. The carcass was gone. No sounds. No lights. No indication anyone had approached. Just gone. He reviewed his footage. It showed the field. The carcass visible. Then between 2 frames it disappeared. Not gradual. Instantaneous. 1 frame present. Next frame absent. He replayed it. Same result. The video showed the removal, but not what removed it. Just absence where presence had been. This happened 3 more times that season. Different locations. Same pattern. The officers stopped investigating them. Just documented and moved on. Other officers reported similar incidents. Different regions. Same behavior. Deer killed cleanly. Left in fields. Then vanishing. No evidence of removal. Just disappearance. The Wildlife Service started tracking these cases. Created a file. Consolidated reports. Looking for patterns. They found several. All incidents occurred within specific geographical areas. All during hunting season. All involving single deer. All removed within hours. But no explanation. No leads. No suspects. Eventually they classified it as unsolved. Filed it under ongoing investigations. But the investigation stopped. Because there was nothing to investigate. No evidence. No witnesses. No suspects. Just animals disappearing. Against all logic. Against all possibility. And the officers who encountered it learned to accept it. Another unexplained pattern in work that's full of them. Another file that gets opened, documented, and quietly closed without resolution. The deer counts in those areas never match the harvest reports. A subway system operator in Toronto worked the night maintenance window. After the trains stopped running. Before they started again. 3-hour window. 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. His job was track inspection. Walking the tunnels. Checking rails. Signals. Infrastructure. Looking for problems before the system went live again. He worked with a partner. Safety protocol. Never alone in the tunnels. They'd start at one end of a line. Walk the entire route. End at the other terminus. One April night, they were working the eastern section. About halfway through their route. Quiet. Just their footsteps. The occasional drip of water. Standard tunnel environment. His partner stopped. Said he heard something. They both listened. Faint. Distant. Like music. Very quiet. Coming from ahead. They walked toward it. The sound got louder. Music. Definitely music. Like a radio or speaker. But muffled. Underground. They reached a maintenance alcove. The sound was coming from there. They shined their lights in. Empty. Just bare concrete. Conduits on the walls. The music continued. Louder now. They could make out melody. Old song. Couldn't place it. But definitely music. Playing from somewhere. They searched the alcove. No radio. No speakers. No equipment that could produce sound. But the music played. Clear. Consistent. They radioed the control center. Described what they were hearing. Control said they'd check. Called back 5 minutes later. Said there were no authorized broadcasts in the tunnels. No equipment that should be producing sound. The operator said they were hearing it. Clear as anything. Control asked them to record it. He got his phone. Started recording. The music continued. He played back the recording. Silence. Just the ambient sound of the tunnel. No music. He tried again. Same result. His partner confirmed. They could both hear it. But it wasn't recording. Control said to continue their inspection. Note the location. They'd send a technical team to investigate. The operators moved on. The music faded behind them. They completed their route. Filed their report. A technical team was dispatched the following night. They found nothing. No equipment. No malfunction. No source for the music. The operators were questioned separately. Both described the same thing. Same location. Same music. Both had heard clearly. Both confirmed it didn't record. The investigation concluded. No findings. Possible auditory phenomenon. Acoustic reflection. Sound from surface reaching the tunnels. But the operators knew what they'd heard. And they knew it wasn't reflection. It was too clear. Too localized. Too consistent. They requested different assignments. Different lines. Different shifts. Both were accommodated. Neither works that section anymore. But other maintenance workers have reported similar experiences. Different locations. Different lines. Always music. Always at night. Always between 2 and 5 a.m. Always unrecordable. Just present. Audible. Impossible to document. And always playing the same types of songs. Old songs. Decades old. Music from times when the system was younger. When different people worked there. Different trains ran. Different lights illuminated the tunnels. Music from a past that's somehow still present. Still broadcasting. Still filling empty spaces with sound that shouldn't exist. The Transit Authority doesn't include it in their incident reports. Emergency responders develop certain instincts. Pattern recognition. Threat assessment. The ability to read situations quickly. These instincts are valuable. Life-saving. But they're also fallible. Subject to bias. Fatigue. Stress. When an experienced responder reports a strong instinctive reaction to a seemingly normal situation, it's taken seriously. But it's also questioned. Because instinct isn't evidence. It's interpretation. And interpretation can be wrong. But when multiple responders independently report the same instinct about the same location, the same address, the same building, that becomes something else. Not evidence exactly, but pattern. And patterns matter. They indicate something consistent, something reproducible, even if it's not tangible, even if it's just feeling. The response is usually to flag the location. Note in dispatch systems. Warn responders. Not officially, just informally. Word gets passed. Units know. They approach differently, more carefully, more prepared. Not for danger necessarily, just for wrongness. For the feeling that something's not right. And that preparation matters. Even if the threat never manifests. Even if nothing happens. The preparation itself provides protection. Or at least comfort. The sense that others have felt this too. That you're not alone in your reaction. That maybe there's something there after all. A helicopter paramedic in British Columbia worked mountain rescue. Remote areas. Difficult terrain. Injured hikers. Lost climbers. Medical emergencies in locations ground units couldn't reach quickly. His team consisted of pilot, paramedic, and rescue specialist. They'd flown together for 5 years. Smooth operation. Efficient. Professional. One August afternoon they got a call. Hiker injured. High altitude location. Difficult access. They responded. Flight time 40 minutes. They arrived on scene. Located the patient. Young female. Ankle injury. Unable to walk. Her partner was with her. They performed the rescue. Standard operation. Lowered the specialist. Assessed the patient. Loaded her into the litter. Hoisted her up. Everything by procedure. They flew to the nearest hospital. Transferred care. Returned to base. Routine mission. No complications. That evening the paramedic was reviewing his documentation. Something bothered him. He couldn't identify what. Just a sense something was wrong. He reviewed his notes. Patient assessment. Vital signs. Treatment. All standard. All correct. But the feeling persisted. He checked the mission report. Reviewed the timeline. Everything matched. He asked his crew, did anything seem off about that call? Both said no. Standard rescue. Why? He couldn't explain it. Just something. A detail he couldn't place. He let it go. Completed his paperwork. 2 weeks later they got another call. Different location. Same general area. Different peak. Hiker injured. Similar situation. Ankle injury. Female patient. They responded. As they approached the location, the paramedic felt it again. That wrongness. Stronger now. He mentioned it over the intercom. Asked if anyone else felt strange about this. The pilot said the coordinates seemed familiar. The rescue specialist checked. Different location. Different GPS coordinates. But close to the previous call. Within 5 kilometers. They located the patient. She was in the same position as before. Same posture. Same injury presentation. The paramedic looked at her partner. It was the same person. Same male. Same clothing. Same backpack. He mentioned this to his crew. They confirmed. Same people. The pilot radioed down. Asked if they'd been rescued before. 2 weeks ago. The partner looked up. Confused. Said no. First time hiking this area. First time needing rescue. The paramedic descended. Examined the patient. Same injury. Left ankle. Same swelling pattern. Same pain response. He asked her directly. Have we treated you before? She said no. Never been in a helicopter. First time injured hiking. He looked at her face. It was the same person. He was certain. Same features. Same voice. Same mannerisms. He completed the assessment. They performed the rescue. Loaded her. Hoisted up. Flew to the hospital. During transport, he asked more questions. Where are you from? She named a city. Same city as the previous patient. What do you do? She described her job. Same profession. He checked his previous notes. Everything matched. But she insisted they'd never met. Never been rescued. This was her first serious injury. At the hospital, he pulled up the previous patient's record. Different name. Different date of birth. Different identification. But the photograph looked identical. He showed it to his crew. They agreed. Same person. Or incredibly similar. The pilot suggested twins. The paramedic checked. The previous patient's record showed no family connections. No listed siblings. He contacted the previous patient. Left a message. Asked her to call back. She did the next day. He asked if she had a twin. A sister. Any family member who looked similar. She said no. Only child. He described the second rescue. She went quiet. Then she said something strange. She said she'd been having dreams. Since the first rescue. Dreams about hiking. Getting injured again. Different location, but same injury. Same pain. She'd wake up, and her ankle would hurt. Not injured. Just sore. Like she twisted it. He didn't know what to say. He thanked her. End of the call. Over the next 3 months, they responded to 4 more similar calls. Different locations. Always within the same mountain range. Always ankle injuries. Always female patients. Always with male partners. The faces started to blur together. Similar, but not identical. Or maybe identical, but he couldn't tell anymore. Different names. Different backgrounds. But the situations felt duplicated. Copied. Like they were responding to the same emergency, over and over with slight variations. He started documenting these. Personal log. Not official. Just tracking the pattern. After the 7th call, he presented it to his supervisor. Showed him the records. The similarities. The supervisor reviewed them. Said it was probably coincidence. Popular hiking area. Common injury. Similar demographics. The paramedic accepted this. But he requested assignment to a different region. Different coverage area. The supervisor approved. He's been working the coastal region for 8 months now. Different terrain. Different call types. But sometimes he sees women hiking. Ankle wrapped. Limping slightly. And he wonders if they're going to fall. If they're going to injure themselves. If maybe he'll get the call. Respond. Find them in the mountains. Same injury. Same situation. Same impossible repetition. And he wonders if it's the mountains. If there's something about that range that creates loops. Catches people in cycles of injury and rescue. Or if it's him. If maybe he's the one repeating. Responding to the same call in different forms. Unable to break the pattern. Unable to see that he's been there before. That this has all happened already. That time in those mountains doesn't move forward. It just circles. Returning to the same moment. The same emergency. The same rescue. Over and over. And everyone involved thinks it's the first time. But somewhere in the back of their minds they recognize it. Feel it. Know they've been here before. Even if they can't remember when. He doesn't fly over those mountains anymore. Even when it's the most direct route. Some locations develop reputations among emergency workers. Addresses that generate multiple calls. Buildings with recurring problems. Intersections where accidents cluster. These are documented. Studied. Sometimes there are explanations. Structural issues. Poor design. Inadequate signaling. Other times there aren't. The calls just keep coming. Different people. Different situations. But same location. Same coordinates. And after enough incidents, the location itself becomes the variable. Not the people involved. Not the circumstances. Just a place. Workers start to recognize these addresses immediately. See them on the dispatch screen and know. Know it's going to be complicated. Know it's going to feel wrong. Know they're going to spend the next hour trying to resolve something that doesn't want to be resolved. And they go anyway. Because that's the job. You respond to every call, every address, regardless of history, regardless of feeling. But you prepare differently. Bring more equipment. Request backup earlier. Trust your instincts more. Because experience has taught you that some places are different. Some places resist resolution. Some places pull you in. And if you're not careful, you become part of their history. Another incident. Another report. Another person who responded and left changed. Not traumatized. Not injured. Just changed. Aware of something you weren't before. Something about how reality works. Or doesn't work. And that awareness stays with you. Colors everything else. Makes other calls feel uncertain. Makes you question whether you're seeing what's actually there or what you expect to see based on previous experience. And that uncertainty is worse than any actual danger. Because danger you can respond to. Uncertainty just exists. Persistent. Unresolvable. Following you from call to call. Scene to scene. Until you can't remember what it felt like before you knew. Before you responded to that address. Before you saw what was there. Or what wasn't there. Before everything became questionable. A border services officer in Saskatchewan worked a remote crossing. Low traffic. Mostly commercial trucks. Few private vehicles. Night shifts were quiet. Long stretches of nothing. Then brief moments of processing. Checking documentation. Asking standard questions. Most crossings took 5 minutes. One September night, a vehicle approached. Around 3 a.m. sedan. Single occupant. Male driver. The officer stepped out. Approached. Asked for documentation. The driver handed over a passport. The officer examined it. Canadian. Valid. Recent issue. The photograph matched. He asked the standard questions. Where are you coming from? The driver said the United States. Business trip. Returning home. The officer asked what kind of business. The driver described consulting work. Details that sounded rehearsed, but plausible. The officer asked how long he'd been in the United States. The driver said 5 days. The officer checked the passport. No exit stamp. No entry stamp. Nothing indicating recent travel. He mentioned this. The driver looked confused. Said he'd crossed at a different port. They should have stamped it. The officer asked which port. The driver named one. The officer knew it. Major crossing. They always stamped. He asked if the driver had any receipts. Hotel confirmations. Anything proving the trip. The driver said everything was electronic. Could he check his phone? The officer said yes. The driver reached for his phone. Couldn't find it. Check pockets. Check the car. No phone. He seemed genuinely confused. Said he had it when he started driving. The officer asked him to step out. Secondary inspection. The driver complied. The officer searched the vehicle. No phone. No luggage. No business materials. No evidence of travel. Just an empty car. Clean. Almost too clean. The officer returned to the driver. Asked him to explain. Where's your luggage? Your phone. Evidence of your trip. The driver stood there. Silent. Then he said something that made the officer's skin feel cold. He said he didn't know. Said he couldn't remember leaving. Couldn't remember the drive. Remembered being at work. At his hotel. Then being here. In the car. Approaching the border. Nothing in between. The officer asked where he worked. What hotel? The driver gave vague answers. Couldn't remember specific names. Couldn't remember the city. Just remember being there. Doing work. Then driving. The officer called for backup. This was beyond standard procedure. The driver wasn't aggressive. Wasn't impaired. Just confused. Disconnected. Backup arrived. They questioned him separately. Same responses. Same gaps. He couldn't provide basic information about his supposed trip. They checked his license. Valid. Address came back to a residence 200 kilometers away. Local police were contacted. Asked to do a welfare check. They called back. House was secure. No signs of disturbance. But neighbors said they'd seen him leave 5 days ago. Saw him load luggage. Drive away. The officers at the border didn't know what to do. The man wasn't breaking any laws. Wasn't a threat. Just confused. They called medical services. Had him evaluated. Preliminary assessment showed no signs of medical emergency. No stroke, no head injury, just memory gaps. They released him, told him to see a doctor, follow up with his physician. He agreed, drove away. The officer filed his report, documented everything. A week later, he heard from local police. The man had gone to a doctor. Full evaluation. Everything normal. No medical explanation. But his memory never returned. Those 5 days were just gone. No hotel records. No credit card transactions. No evidence he'd been in the United States. His luggage was never found. His phone was never found. He'd vanished for 5 days. Then reappeared at a border crossing, driving a clean car with no evidence of travel. And he couldn't explain any of it. The officer thinks about it sometimes. Where the man was. What he was doing. Why he appeared at that crossing at 3 in the morning with no memory and no evidence. And he thinks about how many other people might cross that border the same way. Appearing without history. Without evidence. Just emerging from somewhere else. Somewhere that doesn't leave traces. And border systems process them. Ask routine questions. Wave them through. Never knowing they're documenting something impossible. Never knowing that the person crossing isn't traveling between countries. They're traveling between something else. Some other boundary. And sometimes they remember. Sometimes they don't. And the ones who don't just integrate back into normal life. Carrying gaps they can't explain. Absences they can't account for. Living with the certainty that something happened, but having no way to prove it. No way to understand it. Just a border crossing record saying they were somewhere. At some time. And everything else is blank. The officer requested transfer to a busier crossing where the volume doesn't allow time to think. Call centers record everything. Every conversation. Every keystroke. Every dispatch. The data is stored. Backed up. Auditable. When something occurs that isn't in the records, it creates fundamental problems. Not because the event was important, but because the absence suggests system failure. And system failure means liability, means questions, means investigations. So when operators report experiences that didn't record, calls they answered that aren't logged, dispatches they made that don't show in archives, the response is to blame the operator. Memory error, fatigue, confusion with another shift. Because the system doesn't fail. The system is reliable. The system is truth. And if an operator's memory contradicts the system, then the memory is wrong. Must be wrong. Even when multiple operators report the same call. Same time. Same details. Memory can be collective. Shared delusion. Contamination between accounts. There's always an explanation that protects the system. That maintains its authority. Because acknowledging that the system doesn't record everything. That there are gaps. That some calls exist outside its awareness. That would require accepting that reality and records don't always match. That documentation is incomplete. That we're operating with less knowledge than we think. And that's not acceptable. So the operators are wrong. Always wrong. And they learn to stop reporting. Stop mentioning. Stop expecting anyone to believe them. They just know, privately, quietly, that sometimes they answer calls that don't exist. Dispatch to scenes that never happened. Process information that leaves no trace. And they carry that knowledge, that uncertainty, for the rest of their careers. An industrial fire response team in Ontario worked refinery emergency coverage. Specialized team, chemical fires, large-scale industrial incidents. They trained constantly, drilled procedures, maintained equipment. Actual responses were rare, maybe 3 or 4 per year. One March night, they got an alert. Chemical leak. Section 7 of the refinery. Potential fire hazard. They suited up, drove to the location. Section 7 was a processing area. Large tanks. Complex piping. Dangerous under the best conditions. They arrived. Set up. Prepared to address the leak. The team lead checked the monitors. No chemical readings. No vapor detection. No evidence of leak. He radioed refinery control. Asked for confirmation. Control said the sensors had triggered. Automatic alert. Chemical leak detected. But the team's portable monitors showed nothing. They searched the area, checked every line, every valve, every connection. Nothing. No leak. No damage. No malfunction. They reported this. Control said the sensors were still showing positive, still detecting chemicals. The team lead checked their own equipment, properly calibrated, functioning correctly. He asked Control to specify which sensors. Control listed them. The team went to those exact locations, checked the sensors directly. They were reading normal. No alerts. No triggers. The team lead radioed back, said the sensors on site were showing normal. Control insisted they were seeing alerts centrally. The team stayed on site, continued checking. An hour passed. Control called, said the alerts had stopped. All clear. The team secured their equipment, returned to station, filed their report. False alarm. Sensor malfunction. But something bothered the team lead. He requested the sensor data, got the logs from Control. The sensors had registered chemical presence for exactly 63 minutes. Consistent readings. Then suddenly stopped. All at once. No fade. No gradual decrease. Just present then absent. He checked the chemical in question. Checked its properties. Dispersal patterns. It shouldn't have behaved that way. Should have shown gradual decrease as it dispersed. Should have lingered in some areas longer than others. But the readings showed uniform presence, then uniform absence, like something had turned it on and off. He sent the data to the safety department, asked for analysis. They reviewed it, concluded sensor error, possible electrical interference, cross-signal contamination. The team lead accepted this. But 2 months later it happened again. Same location, same chemical, same pattern. 63 minutes of detection. Then nothing. The team responded. Same result. No actual leak. No evidence. Just sensor readings. This happened 4 more times that year. Always section 7. Always the same chemical. Always 63 minutes. The team started calling it the ghost leak. Not officially. Just among themselves. They'd respond. Go through the procedures. Find nothing. Return. Document it as false alarm. Eventually maintenance replaced all the sensors in section 7. New equipment. New calibrations. Different manufacturer. The alert stopped. For 6 months. Then they started again. New sensors. Same readings. Same pattern. Same duration. The team lead retired. After 28 years. He'd had enough. He told his replacement about the ghost leak. Showed him the records. The patterns. The replacement listened. Said he'd keep an eye on it. But the team lead could tell he didn't believe. Thought it was just old equipment. System quirks. Nothing to worry about. The team lead didn't argue. Just passed on the information. Because that's all you can do. Document what you experienced. Share what you learned. And let the next person decide whether to believe. Whether to worry. Whether to wonder if maybe the sensors aren't malfunctioning. If maybe they're detecting exactly what they're supposed to. Something present in section 7. Something that appears for exactly 63 minutes. Registers as chemical vapor. Then vanishes without dispersing. Without leaving residue. Without following any known physical laws. Something that exists in a way the equipment can measure, but humans can't perceive. And if that's true, if the sensors are right and the human observations are incomplete, then what else are we missing? What else is present but invisible? Measurable but imperceptible? Real but impossible? Section 7 has the highest equipment replacement rate in the facility. When you work enough nights, you start to notice temporal anomalies. Not dramatic, not time travel, just small inconsistencies. Minutes that feel like hours. Hours that feel like minutes. Gaps where you can't account for time. Not blackouts. You're conscious, aware, but when you check your watch, you've lost 30 minutes. Or gained them. The clock jumped, or didn't move when it should have. These experiences are common enough that workers don't discuss them. They just notice, privately, individually, and they develop strategies. Check the time more frequently. Document timestamps more carefully. Create redundancy. Because if you can't trust your perception of duration, you need external validation. But even that becomes uncertain. Because sometimes the clocks disagree. Your watch says one thing. The wall clock says another. Your phone says something else. And they're all slightly different. Not synchronized. And you can't remember which one was right to begin with. Which one you should trust. So you just pick one. Commit to it. Move forward. And hope that when your shift ends, you're in sync with everyone else. That you haven't drifted too far into your own timeline. That you can still interact normally with people who've been experiencing time at the standard rate. Most nights you can. Most nights you're fine. But occasionally you're off. Slightly out of phase. And people notice. Ask if you're okay. Say you seem distant. Distracted. And you are. Because you're still partially in the night. Still operating on that altered time. And it takes hours. Sometimes days. To fully return. To reintegrate with normal duration. And in that transition period, you're vulnerable. Uncertain. Not entirely present. Not entirely real. Just existing in the space between. The gap. The place where time doesn't move the way it should. And you wonder if maybe you never fully return. If maybe each night takes something. Leaves you slightly more disconnected. Slightly more adrift. Until eventually you're living completely outside standard time. Moving through a world that doesn't notice you anymore. Because you're not quite there. Not quite synchronized. Just a temporal echo. Repeating the same shift. The same calls. The same procedures. Forever. Without realizing it's already happened. That you died. Or disappeared. Or simply stopped being real. And what's left is just memory. Just routine. Just the shape of you continuing because it doesn't know how to stop. A power grid operator in Manitoba worked overnight monitoring. Grid stability. Load balancing. Emergency response. His shift covered the provincial system. Hundreds of substations. Thousands of kilometers of transmission lines. He sat in a control room. Watched screens. Responded to automated alerts. Adjusted load as necessary. The work was solitary. Just him and the systems. He'd been doing it for 11 years. One January night, he was monitoring standard operations. Everything stable. Load balanced. No issues. Around 2:30, he got an alert. Substation 41. Power drop. Significant loss. He checked the readings. Confirmed. Substation 41 was offline. Completely offline. He checked connected systems. They were compensating. Automatically redistributing load. No service interruptions. But 41 was dark. He initiated diagnostics. Checked remote systems. Everything showed offline. Not malfunction. Not damage. Just offline. Like someone had shut it down. But there were no shutdown commands. No maintenance scheduled. It just stopped. He radioed the field crew. Asked them to dispatch to 41. Check it physically. They acknowledged. Estimated arrival 40 minutes. Rural location. He monitored. The connected systems continued compensating. Everything remained stable. Just 41 missing from the grid. The field crew arrived. Radioed in. They were at the substation. He asked for status. They said everything looked normal. All equipment appeared functional. No visible damage. No alarms. But it wasn't generating. It wasn't connected to the grid. They ran diagnostics locally. Everything tested functional. But it wouldn't activate. Wouldn't come online. They tried manual restart. Nothing. It was like the station was dead. Not broken. Just dead. They stayed on site. Worked through the procedures. An hour passed. The operator was running scenarios. Calculating how long the grid could compensate. Whether they needed to initiate rolling blackouts. Then the alert cleared. Substation 41 was online. Full power. Normal operation. He radioed the field crew. Asked what they'd done. They said nothing. They were still working diagnostics. Hadn't gotten it restarted yet. He insisted it was showing online. Full power. They checked. Confirmed. Station was running. All systems nominal. But they hadn't activated it. Hadn't completed any procedures. It just started. On its own. They secured the site. Returned to base. The operator documented everything. Filed his report. System anomaly. Cause unknown. But it bothered him. He pulled historical data. Checked if this had happened before. It had. Substation 41. Same pattern. Unexplained shutdown. Unexplained restart. No cause. No resolution. It had happened 11 times over the past 15 years. Always at night. Always between 2 and 4 a.m. Always lasting between 60 and 90 minutes. Always resolving on its own. He submitted this to his supervisor. The supervisor reviewed it. Said they'd schedule a full inspection. Comprehensive diagnostics. They did. 2 weeks later, brought in engineers. Specialists. They checked every system. Every component. Every line. Everything was perfect. Better than perfect. Equipment that should have shown where was pristine. Connections that should have degraded were flawless. The station was operating better than design specifications. The engineers couldn't explain it. One of them mentioned it was like the station was newer than it should be. Like it had been replaced. But records showed original installation. 30 years old. Should be showing age. Wasn't. The inspection was filed. No findings. No recommendations. Everything nominal. Substation 41 continued operating normally. Until 3 months later. 2:47 a.m. It went offline. Same pattern. 92 minutes. Then restarted on its own. The operator didn't report it. Just documented it privately. Because he'd realized something. Each time the station went offline. Each time it restarted. It came back slightly improved. Slightly better. Like something was maintaining it. Upgrading it. During those dark hours when it was disconnected from the grid. Disconnected from monitoring. Off the record. Something was accessing it. Working on it. Keeping it functional. And whatever was doing it didn't want to be observed. Didn't want to be documented. Just wanted to keep the station running. Keep the power flowing. For reasons it wouldn't explain. Couldn't explain. And the operator learned to accept this. To let it happen. Because the station worked. Better than it should. More reliable than any other in the system. And if something was maintaining it. Some presence or process that operated outside normal parameters. Then maybe that was acceptable. Maybe that was fine. As long as the power kept flowing. As long as people stayed warm. As long as the grid remained stable. Maybe it didn't matter that something impossible was happening. Maybe it just mattered that it helped. That it worked. That it kept things running when they should have failed years ago. He never requested transfer from that sector. The file was opened at 4:17 a.m. The case number was assigned. The responding unit was logged. But when the supervisor reviewed it at 6:30, the narrative field was empty. Not deleted. Not corrupted. Just empty. Like whoever opened it. Whoever responded. Never completed their report. Never documented what they found. Just opened the file. Then stopped. And no one followed up. No one asked. The file stayed in the system for 3 years before anyone noticed. And when they did, well, they tried to access the full record. The case number led nowhere. Just an error message. File not found. But the index still showed it. Still listed it. A case that exists but doesn't exist. Open but never filed. Responded but never resolved. And somewhere an officer remembers. Knows what they saw. What they found. But decided not to write it down. Decided some things shouldn't be documented. Shouldn't be made official. Shouldn't be admitted to have happened. And that decision becomes permanent. Becomes silence. Becomes an empty field in a database. A marker of something that occurred but was never acknowledged. Never verified. Never made real. And the officer carries it. That memory. That knowledge. That burden of having responded to something that officially never happened. Of having seen something that left no record. No evidence. No proof it ever existed. Except the empty file. The blank space. The nothing that somehow takes up room. Somehow persists. Somehow reminds everyone who sees it that sometimes the most important documentation is the documentation that isn't there.